The sound of gunfire tore through the frigid Afghan night. Michael Ghost Reeves watched his teammate collapse, blood pumping from the neck wound in rhythmic spurts that slowed with each desperate heartbeat. The ambush had been perfect. Too perfect. In the chaos of muzzle flashes and screams, Michael's trained eyes locked onto the face of the only other surviving teammate before it vanished into shadow. Carter. Those cold eyes showed no remorse as he melted into the darkness. The man who had sold out the entire team. 5 years later, the town of Clearwater, Montana clung to existence between ancient forests and jagged mountain ridges. Here, Michael Reeves moved through life like a man determined to leave no footprints. At 45, the former Delta Force operator ran a small survival training camp and gun store that provided enough income without requiring excessive interaction. His cabin sat back from the nearest road nestled against the tree line where the national forest began. The structure was simple but strategic: reinforced walls, clear sight lines, multiple escape routes, and hidden caches of emergency supplies. Some nights, the screams of his dying teammates clawed into his consciousness. He'd wake gasping, skin slick with cold sweat, the taste of Afghanistan's dust still coating his tongue. The ghost would never leave him. The names of the men he'd failed to save were etched into his soul more permanently than the faded Delta Force tattoo on his shoulder blade. Rex, his 9-year-old German Shepherd, was the only living creature Michael allowed close. The retired military working dog had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, detecting IEDs and insurgents with uncanny precision. Now, like his master, Rex carried his own war wounds, a permanent limp from shrapnel, and a heightened vigilance that never fully subsided. "Just you and me against the world, boy," Michael murmured each morning as they ran the perimeter together, checking the subtle alarm systems he'd installed throughout the property. Michael's routine rarely varied until Sarah Mitchell walked through his door. She entered the gun shop late Tuesday afternoon, the bell above the door announcing her presence. Michael assessed her automatically mid to late 30s athletic build, careful eyes that scanned the room before settling on him. Her posture betrayed military background despite her casual demeanor. "I need a handgun," she said, skipping any pretense of small talk. "Something reliable but manageable. I have some experience, but it's been a while." Michael nodded once, retrieving 3 options from beneath the glass counter. "Purpose, home defense," she replied too quickly. Her eyes briefly shifted away, the universal tell of a partial truth. "These are all solid choices for someone with training who's been out of practice," he said, laying out a Glock 19, a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield, and a Sig Sauer P365. As she reached for the Sig, her sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing a distinctive scar pattern on her wrist. Michael recognized it immediately, the kind left by shrapnel from a specific type of IED favored by insurgents in Helmand Province. "Afghanistan?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could catch it. Her eyes snapped to his, wary but recognizing a fellow veteran. 2 tours, combat medic with the 31st CSH. Around the same time, different capacity. While completing the paperwork, she volunteered, "I'm Sarah Mitchell. My father and I moved here last month. He's Frank Mitchell, Vietnam vet. Retired now, health isn't great." "Any reason you need this suddenly?" he asked, his instincts prickling. Sarah hesitated, then met his eyes directly. "Probably nothing, just some unfamiliar vehicles around our place. Men watching the house. Claimed to be from the VA checking on my father's benefits, but something felt off." As she turned to leave, a boy appeared in the doorway, around 12, thin-framed, serious eyes that took in everything without meeting anyone's gaze. He clutched a sketchbook against his chest like armor. "Nathan, I told you to wait in the car," Sarah said, her tone softening. The boy didn't respond verbally, just moved to her side, still surveying the shop with methodical precision. When his eyes landed on Rex, who lay in the corner on his designated mat, something changed in the boy's posture. "That's Rex," Michael said, noticing the boy's interest. "Military working dog, retired now. My son has always connected with animals more easily than people," Sarah explained quietly. "He's on the autism spectrum. High functioning, but social situations can be difficult for him." Michael watched as Nathan slowly approached Rex, movements deliberate and non-threatening. The dog allowed the boy to extend a hand, sniffing it carefully before pressing his graying muzzle against the child's palm, a gesture of acceptance Rex rarely offered. Before leaving, Sarah turned back, her expression serious. "If you hear anything about those men asking around town, I'd appreciate a call." She slid a business card across the counter. My father, he has secrets from the war. Things he won't discuss even with me. But they're clearly catching up with him. After they left, Michael locked the shop early and made his way to Martha's Diner, the unofficial intelligence hub of Clearwater. If strangers were asking questions in town, Martha would know. Twice in 1 month, Mike, I'm flattered, said the 73-year-old owner. He managed a tight smile, settling into a corner booth. Coffee, please, and information if you've got it. Martha placed a mug before him, leaning in conspiratorially. About the government men asking after old Frank Mitchell. Michael's instincts sharpened. They told you they were government. VA officials, they said. 3 of them all wearing suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage. Asked where Frank lived, how long he'd been in town, whether he had visitors. She frowned. Didn't feel right, them asking so many questions about a sick old vet. What else did they want to know? If he ever talked about Vietnam, specific operations. Martha's voice dropped further. Asked if he mentioned something called Phoenix. Mean anything to you? Michael kept his expression neutral, but his pulse quickened. Operation Phoenix, the CIA's controversial Vietnam-era program targeting Viet Cong infrastructure. Notorious for its brutality and questionable tactics. When were they here last? Yesterday afternoon, left in a black suburban government plates. That night, Michael pulled a locked footlocker from beneath his bed. Inside lay the remnants of Lieutenant Michael Ghost Reeves' service records, medals, never displayed photographs of men now dead, and documents linking him to operations so classified they existed in no official record. Beneath a false bottom lay a satellite phone he'd maintained with obsessive diligence despite having no one to call. Until now. His former handler answered on the third ring, voice guarded. I was wondering if I'd ever hear from you again, Ghost. Need information, Jackson? Operation Phoenix. Any surviving command structure or ongoing elements? A long pause. You're stepping into something radioactive. After 5 years of silence, this is what brings you back. Just information, off the record. Jackson's sigh carried years of resignation. Most of the Phoenix directors are dead, except Garrison. Colonel Thomas Garrison, retired 1980, lives in Montana now. Billionaire with private security and deep connections. Any known grudges or unfinished business. Rumors of missing assets from late-stage operations. Gold and weapons that disappeared during the evacuation. Nothing confirmed. Jackson's voice sharpened. What's your involvement, Ghost? Observational only, Michael lied smoothly. Appreciate the intel. Ghost, Jackson said before he could disconnect. Whatever you're circling, be careful. Phoenix left a lot of ghosts behind. Some still have teeth. The attack on Martha's General Store caught him off guard. He'd stopped for supplies the following afternoon, finding the usually bustling shop eerily quiet. The door stood unlocked, the register unattended. Martha, he called hand automatically, reaching for the concealed Glock at his waistband. Martha lay crumpled behind the counter, a gash on her temple, leaking crimson onto the weathered floorboards. Still breathing, pulse steady. Michael placed his rolled jacket beneath her head, then continued his sweep. The back door stood slightly ajar. Outside, a black sedan idled in the alley trunk, partially open. Muffled sounds emerged from within. Inside, bound with zip ties and duct tape across her mouth, lay Sarah Mitchell. Her eyes widened when she saw Michael, then flicked urgently toward the side of the building. Michael reacted without hesitation, pressing himself against the wall, just as footsteps rounded the corner. A tall man with military bearing, in a poorly concealed shoulder holster, appeared, keys in hand. The man sensed the threat too late. Michael struck with practiced efficiency, one precise blow to the base of the skull, and the man crumpled unconscious. Zip ties from Michael's pocket secured the threat before he returned to free Sarah. How did you, she began as he cut through her restraints. Later, Michael interrupted, already scanning for additional hostiles. We need to move. My father and Nathan, Sarah gasped, rubbing circulation back into her wrists. They were at home when these men took me. Michael helped her from the trunk, assessing her condition with a practiced eye. Can you drive? At her nod, he tossed her the keys to his truck. Go to this address, he said, scribbling on a receipt. Sarah Jensen's place. She's a retired nurse. Tell her it's a code echo. What about you? I'll find Nathan and your father. Go now. The Mitchell farmhouse stood quiet under the afternoon sun. Through binoculars, Michael observed two men in suits inside visible through the kitchen window. No sign of Frank or Nathan. As he watched, one man answered a call, his body language shifting to alert. They discovered their missing colleague. Time compressed. Michael circled to the rear entrance, using a fallen branch to trigger the motion sensor light at the front porch. When both men moved to investigate, he slipped inside through the back door. Frank Mitchell sat in the living room, ashen-faced but alive, an oxygen tank beside his wheelchair. Nathan crouched behind the sofa, still and silent as a shadow. Michael pressed a finger to his lips, moving toward them with urgency. Frank's rheumy eyes registered recognition, then resigned acceptance. "They found me," the old man whispered, voice threadbare. "After all these years." "Where's Sarah?" Nathan asked, the first words Michael had heard from the boy. "Safe. We need to move before they return." Frank shook his head weakly. "I can't run anymore, son. Too sick." "But Nathan." "Both of you," Michael insisted, already calculating evacuation routes. They'd barely reached the tree line when shouts erupted from the house. Michael helped Frank navigate the uneven ground, one arm supporting the frail veteran, while the other remained free for his weapon. Nathan moved ahead, surprisingly agile and focused despite the danger. They reached the concealed truck with seconds to spare. As Michael helped Frank into the passenger seat, the crack of a rifle shot splintered a tree trunk inches from his head. "Down," he ordered Nathan, pushing the boy toward the floorboards. Michael drew his Glock, firing 3 carefully placed rounds toward their pursuers, not to hit, but to force cover and delay. Then he was behind the wheel, engine roaring to life as another bullet shattered the side mirror. The truck fishtailed onto the Forest Service road tires, spitting gravel as they accelerated away from the farmhouse. In the rearview mirror, Michael watched 2 men emerge from the trees, weapons raised but holding fire. One spoke urgently into a radio. They weren't trying to kill, they wanted captures. Information. "They'll set up roadblocks," Frank wheezed, clutching his oxygen mask. "They're too well connected." "Not taking roads," Michael replied, turning sharply onto a barely visible fire break that cut through dense pine forest. Sarah Jensen's cabin stood in a small clearing deep in the national forest. Sarah Mitchell's rental car was already parked beside the porch. The reunion between father, son, and daughter was brief but intense, the embrace of people who understood how quickly everything could be lost. Michael hung back, allowing them their moment while scanning the surroundings for threats. Sarah Jensen, a 60-year-old former combat nurse with a prosthetic leg, had already prepared the cabin's safe room, a reinforced basement, accessible through a hidden entrance in the pantry. 48 hours, she told Michael firmly. Then my daughter comes for her monthly visit. I can't have this situation ongoing by then. After settling the Mitchells in the safe room, Michael retrieved Jensen's offerings, a nondescript van with clean plates, 2 prepaid phones, and a duffel containing basic supplies and ammunition. In the basement, Frank Mitchell's condition had deteriorated. The exertion and stress had taxed his weakened heart. "He needs proper medical care," Sarah told Michael quietly. "Stable environment monitoring. Neither is an option right now." Michael knelt beside the makeshift bed where Frank rested. "Sir, I need to understand what we're dealing with. Who these men are, what they want." Frank's eyes opened, clouded with pain but lucid. "They want what they have always wanted, the location, the evidence was found." "Of what?" This old man glanced at his daughter and grandson, then back to Michael. "During the final days in Vietnam, I was part of a specialized Phoenix unit. We weren't just hunting Viet Cong infrastructure, we were securing assets, gold weapons intelligence files from operations that officially never existed." Michael nodded, understanding. Black funds for black operations. One shipment never made it out. 300 million in gold weapons prototypes, and most importantly, documentation implicating high-level officials in unauthorized operations. Assassinations, drug trafficking, things that would destroy reputations even 50 years later. "And you know where it is," Michael concluded. Frank's chest rose and fell with labored breath. "I'm the only one left alive who does. My unit was ambushed during extraction. I alone survived but couldn't reach the rendezvous. The location died with me, or so they thought." "Until now, what changed?" Sarah interjected. "My father's health. He's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Someone must have accessed his medical records, realized their window was closing. Garrison, Frank confirmed weakly. Colonel Thomas Garrison. He led Phoenix's Montana division. Used the program to build his fortune and connections. The gold would be substantial now, but the documents, they could destroy him and others still in power. Michael processed this information, forming a tactical assessment. The men hunting you are private military contractors, high-end, well-equipped. They'll have resources, intelligence networks, possibly government contacts. We can't fight them, Sarah said, frustration evident in her voice. We need witness protection, FBI involvement. No official channels, Frank insisted with surprising strength. Garrison has people everywhere. How do you think they found us so quickly after we relocated? Michael made his decision. We move tonight. My cabin has better defensive positions, supplies, and escape routes. I can secure it by dawn. Why are you helping us? Sarah asked directly, her eyes searching his. You don't know us. This isn't your fight. Michael looked at Nathan, who sat silently beside Rex. The boy had immediately reconnected with the shepherd upon arrival, and the dog now rested his head protectively across the child's lap. Let's just say I recognize the tactics, Michael replied, and I've got my own ghost to put to rest. They reached Michael's cabin before midnight, using Forest Service roads and game trails to avoid main thoroughfares where surveillance might be established. The property's isolation, once a reflection of Michael's desire to escape humanity, now served a tactical purpose. While Sarah settled Frank in the bedroom and Nathan curled up with Rex in the living room, Michael implemented security protocols he'd established but never expected to use. Motion sensors at key perimeter points, battery-powered cameras covering approach vectors, weapons cached at defensive positions throughout the property. Sarah found him on the back porch checking sight lines with night vision binoculars. Nathan's finally asleep, she said, wrapping her arms around herself against the mountain chill. He hasn't slept properly since we moved to Clearwater. Too vigilant. Michael continued his scan. He has good instincts. He was diagnosed with high-functioning autism at 4. Doctors called his memory and observational skills exceptional. Pride tinged her voice. But the social challenges have been difficult. Sometimes different wiring is an advantage, Michael replied, thinking of operators he'd known, whose neurodivergence made them exceptional at certain aspects of fieldcraft. Sarah studied him in the moonlight. You're not what you seem, are you? The quiet gun shop owner act, it's just that. An act. Michael lowered the binoculars, weighing how much to reveal. Delta Force retired, Special Activities Division after that. Things went bad on my last operation. I lost my team, came here to disappear. Afghanistan, she asked softly. He nodded once tightly. I was there too. Forward surgical team near Kandahar. Saw too many good soldiers die on my table. Her voice remained clinical, but her eyes revealed the weight of those memories. That's where I met Nathan's father, Army Ranger. He didn't come home. Get some rest, he finally said. I'll take first watch. You trust me to take second? She asked, surprised. Combat medic, widow of a ranger, mother protecting her child. Michael's mouth curved in a grim approximation of a smile. I've trusted operations to less qualified personnel. The first attack came at dawn. Michael detected movement at the southwest corner of the property, 2 figures advancing through the tree line with tactical precision. Not locals stumbling upon the wrong property. Professionals executing a sweep. He'd been awake for 22 hours straight, but adrenaline kept fatigue at bay. Waking Sarah with a hand over her mouth, he signaled the situation with military hand gestures she immediately understood. She nodded, moving silently to protect Nathan and her father, while Michael addressed the threat. Rex remained with the family while Michael slipped out the hidden exit beneath the back porch. Moving through familiar terrain, he circled behind the approaching operatives, studying their equipment and coordination. High-end tactical gear, encrypted comms, thermal imaging. These were the professional core, not the advanced team. Michael could have eliminated them easily, but dead bodies created complications and escalation. Instead, he implemented a distraction, triggering a series of small, explosive charges he'd placed along the western property line far from the cabin. As the operators diverted to investigate, Michael retreated to the cabin, gathering the Mitchells quickly. We have 10 minutes, maybe less, he informed them, already collecting essential supplies. They're establishing a perimeter. Soon they'll have air support. Frank struggled to rise from the bed, face gray with pain. I'll slow you down. Leave me. I can buy you time. Nobody gets left behind, Michael replied automatically, the soldier's creed ingrained bone deep. Sarah, help your father. Nathan, grab only what you absolutely need. One small bag. The boy nodded solemnly, filling a backpack with remarkable efficiency. Michael noticed he packed practical items, water bottle, jacket, small first aid kit. No toys, no comfort objects, except a weathered sketchbook that never left his side. Michael led them through the hidden escape tunnel that connected the cabin basement to a concealed exit 50 yards into the forest. As they emerged into the dimly lit forest, the sound of helicopter rotors became audible in the distance. They're escalating faster than expected, Michael muttered. Change of plans. We separate. No, Sarah protested immediately. We stay together. They're expecting a group. 4 people, 1 elderly, 1 child moving slowly. Michael's tone brooked no argument. I'll create a false trail, lead them away from the mountains. You take Frank and Nathan along this ridge. He indicated the route on a small topographical map. There's a hunter's cabin 8 miles northeast, stocked with supplies. Wait there 48 hours. If I don't return, there's a satellite phone in the lockbox. Combination 182407. Sarah wanted to argue but recognized the tactical necessity. How will you find us? I'll find you, he assured her, checking his weapons one final time. Keep moving, stay off ridgelines, avoid open spaces. Nathan. He turned to the boy who watched him with solemn attention. You're the lookout. Your eyes see things others miss. Keep your mother and grandfather safe. The boy nodded with surprising gravity. Like a scout. Exactly like a scout. Michael hesitated, then reached down to unclip something from his belt, a specialized military compass with night sighting capabilities. Use this. True north never changes. Nathan accepted the tool reverently, immediately examining its mechanisms with focused interest. Michael turned to Frank, whose breathing had become increasingly labored. Sir, I need to know, these men, do they know the exact location of what they're seeking? Frank shook his head weakly. No, only that I have it. The coordinates are... He tapped his temple. Up here, memorized long ago, never written down. The distant sound of men shouting carried through the trees. Time running out. Go, Michael ordered, already calculating his diversion route. Now. Sarah hesitated just a moment, then leaned forward and pressed a swift, hard kiss against Michael's cheek. Stay alive, she whispered fiercely. Then they were moving away, Sarah supporting her father, while Nathan ranged slightly ahead, compass already in use, Rex padding silently alongside him. Michael watched until they disappeared into the tree line, then turned in the opposite direction, mind shifting fully into the operational persona he'd buried years ago. Ghost, the shadow who moved unseen, the hunter who became prey to draw enemies away from their target. He started a deliberately messy trail, broken branches, disturbed undergrowth, occasional boot prints in soft earth, amateur enough to look like civilians fleeing in panic, but clear enough for trained trackers to follow. The helicopter grew louder now, accompanied by the sound of ATVs. They were mobilizing significant resources, far more than seemed reasonable for retrieving an old man's secret. Something larger was at stake. Michael allowed himself to be glimpsed briefly at the edge of a clearing, then vanished into denser forest, leading his pursuers steadily away from the Mitchells' escape route. The familiar rhythm of evasion returned to his body, the controlled breathing, the precise movement that minimized sound, the awareness of every twig and leaf that might betray his position. After 2 miles, he reached a rockier section of terrain where tracks would be minimal. Climbing a massive fallen pine, he moved through the upper branches of adjacent trees for 30 yards before dropping back to the ground, now traveling perpendicular to his original path. The pursuers would lose his trail, temporarily split up to search, waste valuable time and resources. Meanwhile, he could circle back toward the hunter's cabin approach from an unexpected direction and ensure the Mitchells remained secure. Michael had covered another mile when he heard the unmistakable sound of a rifle being chambered behind him. That's far enough, Ghost. He froze recognition, slamming into him with physical force. That voice, impossible. Turning slowly, hands raised to shoulder height, Michael found himself staring into the face that had haunted his nightmares for 5 years. Carter. The man looked different. A scar bisected his left cheek. His once military cut had grown into a shaggy style streaked with premature gray, but those eyes remained the same. Cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. "You're supposed to be dead," Michael said, mind racing through scenarios, calculating distances and reaction times. Carter's smile never reached his eyes. "Funny, I thought the same about you." He kept the rifle aimed center mass, maintaining perfect stance. 5 years hiding in this backwater ghost. I'm almost impressed. "How did you find me?" "We never stopped looking. But you are good at I'll give you that. Might have taken another 5 years if old Frank Mitchell hadn't led us right to your doorstep." Carter tilted his head slightly, though I suspect it's more accurate to say you led us to him. "Always the hero, aren't you?" Michael's thoughts raced. Carter here meant the situation was far bigger than Frank's Vietnam secret. The threads of past and present were tangling into something darker than he'd anticipated. "This isn't about Phoenix, is it?" Michael ventured. "Not entirely." Smart as ever, Carter kept the rifle steady. "Phoenix was the beginning. What grew from it continues today. And you, my friend, have stumbled into something much larger than a few old Vietnam secrets." "The ambush in Afghanistan," Michael said, pieces connecting. "Our team was getting too close to something. Your team was asking questions about shipments that didn't exist on any manifest. Money moving through unofficial channels." "Sound familiar?" Carter's expression hardened. The same networks established during Phoenix still operational 50 years later. Moving different products, but the infrastructure remains. Michael felt cold certainty settling into his bones. "You sold us out, your own team." "I chose the winning side," Carter corrected, "as I'm offering you the chance to do now. The Mitchells are inconsequential. It's you Garrison really wants." "Why? Because you're Ghost, the operative who disappeared so completely even the agency thought you were dead. The man with skills Garrison could use in his organization." Carter lowered the rifle slightly. "He's offering amnesty, a place in the hierarchy, substantial compensation." Michael let his hands drop incrementally. "And if I decline," Carter's smile thinned, "then I get to finish what I started in Afghanistan." The moment stretched between them, taut with potential violence. Two predators assessing killing distance. "You know, I never believed you were the type to sell out," Carter continued conversationally. "All that patriotic bullshit about duty and honor, the man who never left anyone behind." "I still don't," Michael replied quietly. Carter's expression shifted, registering the threat a half-second too late. The distinct sound of a round being chambered came from the trees to his left. "Drop it," Sarah ordered, her Glock aimed steadily at Carter's head, lowly. Carter's eyes darted between them, recalculating odds. "The good doctor, smarter than we gave you credit for. The rifle, now." Her voice carried the unshakable authority of someone who had pronounced men dead on operating tables. Carter complied with deliberate slowness, a dangerous smile playing across his lips. "You really think it's just me out here?" As if in answer, Rex emerged silently from the underbrush behind him. Hackles raised, a low growl vibrating from deep in his chest. The German Shepherd's military training was evident in his positioning one lunge away from Carter's hamstring. Michael retrieved the rifle, never taking his eyes off his former teammate. "Where's Nathan Frank?" "Safe," Sarah replied. "Nathan found a concealed ravine. No one would spot it without knowing exactly where to look." Michael nodded, assessing options rapidly. "We need to move. Carter's presence changes everything." "Oh, it certainly does," Carter agreed with unsettling calm. "You see, I'm just the welcome party. The main force is all ready." The sudden thunder of helicopter rotors drowned out his final words as a black tactical helicopter crested the ridgeline above them, spotlight sweeping the forest floor. "Down," Michael shouted, grabbing Sarah and pulling her toward cover as the forest erupted in gunfire. Carter used the distraction to dive for the undergrowth, disappearing into the chaos of splintering trees and kicked up dirt. Rex charged after him, but returned at Michael's sharp whistle command. "This way," Michael shouted above the roar, leading Sarah in a weaving pattern through the densest sections of forest where the helicopter would have difficulty tracking. They ran until the sound of rotors faded, then continued at a fast walk, Michael setting a punishing pace that Sarah matched without complaint. Rex ranged ahead, his military training evident in how he scouted and returned, signaling paths clear of human scent. Nathan marked our trail, Sarah explained between controlled breaths. Said you'd need to find us quickly. Michael glanced back at her. You were supposed to keep moving to the cabin. Nathan saw Carter's men changing direction, following your trail too easily. Her expression hardened. He said it looked wrong, like they knew exactly where to find you. The implications settled heavily between them, not just pursuit-targeted interception. Carter survived Afghanistan, Michael confirmed grimly. He was the one who betrayed my team, and now he's working with whoever's hunting your father. Garrison, Sarah supplied. My father confirmed it's Thomas Garrison. But there's something about an organization called Argus that grew from Phoenix, a network that's continued operating for decades. Michael processed this new information. If Carter's involved, this goes beyond old Vietnam secrets, modern operations, current players. They reached the ravine. Nathan had discovered a narrow cleft between rock formations concealed by a natural overhang of pine boughs. The boy had arranged branches to further disguise the entrance, a tactical instinct that impressed even Michael. Inside, Frank sat propped against the stone wall, oxygen mask covering his face, while Nathan kept watch at a small gap in the foliage. The boy's expression lightened fractionally at the sight of Rex, who immediately moved to his side. Status, Michael asked Frank, automatically assessing the older man's condition. Been better, Frank wheezed, removing the mask briefly. But still breathing. We can't stay here, Michael decided, calculating distances and pursuit patterns. They'll have ground teams sweeping in a standard search grid. We need more distance. My father can't keep up this pace, Sarah protested. His heart. I can make it, Frank interrupted with stubborn determination. Rather die on my feet than give those bastards what they want. Nathan, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly spoke. They're looking for something specific. He opened his sketchbook, revealing detailed drawings of the men who had been watching their house in town. With remarkable precision, he'd captured conversations and speech bubbles beside each figure. Michael studied the pages with growing appreciation for the boy's observational skills. You recorded what they said? Nathan nodded. They talked when they thought I couldn't hear. Said Garrison needs the Phoenix list before someone called the director finds it first. What list? Sarah asked, turning to her father. Frank's expression became guarded. Part of the cargo we secured. Names, operations, connections, a complete network of Phoenix operatives and their post-war activities. Some of those men now hold positions in government intelligence agencies, major corporations. Blackmail material, Michael concluded. Or exposure, Frank countered, depending on who finds it. The pieces aligned in Michael's tactical assessment. That's why they're committing such resources. It's not just about protecting Garrison's reputation or finding missing gold. It's about protecting an entire shadow network that's operated for decades. And now we're caught between Garrison and this director, Sarah said grimly. Michael made his decision. New plan, we head west instead of northeast. I have another safe location completely off-grid. No connection to my documented property holdings. How far? Frank asked, clearly calculating his own endurance. 6 miles, rough terrain. Michael didn't sugarcoat the challenge, but defensible and supplied. Nathan had returned to the lookout position, Rex at his side. Suddenly the boy tensed. Someone's coming, he whispered. Not running, walking slowly, looking at the ground. Michael moved to the observation point where a small gap in the foliage offered limited visibility. A single figure moved methodically through the forest about 70 yards away, head down, tracking. Stay here, he instructed. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, head southwest. There's a stream that will mask your trail. Before Sarah could protest, Michael slipped out of the ravine, moving silently through the underbrush. Drawing his combat knife, he circled wide to approach the tracker from behind. The man was good professional training evident in how he distinguished relevant signs from forest noise. Just as Michael prepared to strike, the tracker spoke without turning. I know you're there, Ghost. 5 o'clock position, about 7 meters back. Michael froze, recognition hitting him like physical impact for the second time that day. The tracker turned slowly, hands empty and visible. David Harris, Clearwater's sheriff, regarded him with resigned expectation. The friendly local lawman was gone, replaced by someone whose bearing screamed federal training. "You're with them," Michael stated flatly, knife still ready. Harris shook his head slowly. "Not exactly. Former CIA, yes. Assigned to monitor you, yes. But this situation has developed beyond my parameters." Michael's mind raced through implications. "You've been watching me for 5 years. Someone needed to ensure you stayed retired." Harris's expression remained neutral. "Until today, that's been my only mission. And now Garrison has deployed resources I wasn't informed existed, military contractors, surveillance capabilities, Carter." Harris gestured to the forest around them. "This operation is far beyond what should be authorized for retrieving one old man's secrets. Unless those secrets threaten something bigger," Michael concluded. Harris nodded once. "I need to know what I'm actually involved in. The Mitchells are hidden 60 yards southwest in the ravine. Frank's condition is deteriorating. You're planning to move them to your secondary safe house near the old mining operation." The casual revelation of information Michael hadn't shared aloud confirmed Harris's capabilities. "If you know all that, why approach me? Because in approximately 12 minutes, an advanced team with thermal imaging will sweep this quadrant," Harris replied matter-of-factly. "And I need to decide if I'm helping you escape or facilitating more capture." Michael studied the man before him, years of operational assessment condensing into seconds. "What do you want? The truth about Phoenix, about Argus, about what Frank Mitchell actually knows that's worth this level of response." Michael calculated, rapidly assessing operational security against necessary alliance. "Frank has coordinates to a cache of evidence from Phoenix operations, documentation that would expose decades of illegal operations and the people behind them." Harris absorbed this with a slight nod, "including current officials. Apparently high enough to warrant this response." The sheriff checked his watch. 10 minutes now. Make your choice, Ghost. Trust me enough to help, or try your luck against thermal imaging and a team of Carter's specialists. If you betray us, I'll kill you before they can reach us." Harris's mouth curved in what might have been respect. "I'd expect nothing less." The rain had begun to fall as they moved back toward the ravine, heavy drops breaking through the forest canopy. Perfect timing precipitation would degrade thermal imaging effectiveness. When they reached the ravine, Sarah immediately raised her weapon at the sight of the sheriff. Nathan pulled Rex closer protectively. "He's with us," Michael announced, though his tone conveyed the provisional nature of the alliance. "For now." "Sheriff Harris," Frank acknowledged weakly from his position against the rock wall. "Finally showing your true colors." Harris knelt beside the ailing veteran. "Been a long time, Captain Mitchell. Not since Saigon 1972. Michael exchanged sharp glances with Sarah. This connection hadn't been mentioned before. "You knew my father in Vietnam," Sarah demanded. "Junior CIA officer attached to Phoenix operations," Harris confirmed without emotion. "I was there when your father's unit secured the cargo everyone's now hunting. I was supposed to receive it at the extraction point." Frank's laugh dissolved into a painful cough. "Full circle, isn't it? The agency's cleanup man then and now. We have 7 minutes before thermal imaging makes this conversation irrelevant," Harris said briskly. "My vehicle is hidden 1 kilometer west. I can get you beyond the search perimeter." "Why help us now?" Sarah asked, suspicion evident. Harris met her gaze directly. "Because whatever's happening, it has escalated beyond standard containment protocols. Garrison has deployed resources outside official channels, which means he's operating without oversight. That makes this personal, not operational." "We accept your help," Michael decided, overriding Sarah's beginning protest. "But the arrangement remains conditional." The rain intensified as they emerged from the ravine, a steady downpour that reduced visibility but provided crucial cover from aerial surveillance. Michael and Harris supported Frank between them, while Sarah and Nathan followed closely, Rex ranging nearby as their early warning system. They moved through the darkening forest as the day's light surrendered to the storm and approaching evening. Michael remained hypervigilant, aware that they were navigating between multiple hostile forces with unclear boundaries and objectives. Harris led them to a weathered Jeep concealed beneath camouflage netting, its mud-covered plates and scratched paint job deliberately nondescript. As they loaded Frank into the back seat, the distant sound of ATV engines penetrated the drumming rain. "They've expanded the search radius," Harris noted quickly, uncovering the vehicle. "We need to move now." Nathan climbed in beside his grandfather Rex, jumping in after him without command. Sarah hesitated, looking to Michael with clear concern. "Can we trust him?" she asked quietly. Michael watched Harris prep the vehicle with professional efficiency. "We don't have better options right now, but stay alert." As they pulled away, navigating overgrown logging roads that didn't appear on public maps, Michael studied their unexpected ally. Harris drove with the skill of someone intimately familiar with evasive techniques, choosing routes that minimized exposure while maximizing rough terrain advantages against pursuers. "You've been in Clearwater watching me for 5 years, Michael stated. "Why two?" Harris kept his eyes on the treacherous road. "After Afghanistan, you disappeared too completely. It raised flags. Someone with your skills going completely dark concerns certain parties. CIA, among others." Harris navigated around a washed-out section of road. "Your file contains recommendations for permanent retirement. Others advocated for reactivation. I was assigned to monitor and assess." "In your assessment," Harris glanced briefly in the rearview mirror where Nathan sat protectively beside his grandfather, the boy's solemn eyes meeting his without flinching. "That you were genuinely done. Until today." A grim smile touched Harris's mouth. "Now I'm reassessing." The Jeep crested a ridge, revealing a panoramic view of the valley below. Through gaps in the storm clouds, Michael could see the black helicopter making sweeping patterns over the eastern sector, well away from their current position. "They'll figure out they've lost us soon," Michael noted. "Then what?" "Then they expand resources again." Harris's expression remained neutral. "Garrison doesn't accept failure, and he's running out of time." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked from the back seat. Harris hesitated, then apparently decided further disclosure was necessary. "Thomas Garrison has stage 4 pancreatic cancer, terminal, 3 months at most, according to intelligence. Whatever he's planning with the Phoenix evidence, it's his final act." Michael processed this new information. Dying men had nothing to lose, making Garrison more dangerous, not less. "Where are you taking us?" he asked, noting they'd veered away from the heading toward his secondary safe house. "Somewhere they won't look immediately," Harris replied. "Old CIA safe house from the Cold War era, off all digital records maintained through legacy protocols." The implication was clear. Harris wasn't just some assigned observer. He had access to resources beyond standard field agent parameters. As the Jeep descended into a densely forested valley, Michael remained poised for betrayal, one hand near his concealed weapon. Trust remained tactical, not emotional, a calculated risk based on immediate survival needs. The rain continued its relentless percussion against the vehicle's roof as darkness claimed the mountains completely. In the back seat, Frank's breathing had become increasingly labored despite the oxygen. Sarah monitored him with professional detachment that couldn't quite mask her personal concern. Nathan had fallen into an exhausted sleep against Rex's solid warmth, the boy's hands still clutching the compass Michael had given him. The sight triggered an unexpected tightness in Michael's chest, a dangerous, emotional response he couldn't afford in the current tactical situation. The safe house appeared suddenly through the trees, a small weathered cabin set against a rock face virtually invisible until they were upon it. Harris cut the engine, the sudden silence emphasizing the isolation of their position. "We should be secure here temporarily," he said, reaching beneath the seat to retrieve a satellite phone. "I need to make contact, confirm status." Michael's hand closed around Harris's wrist with crushing force. "No communications until we clarify exactly who you're reporting to." Harris didn't resist his expression, revealing neither surprise nor offense at the intervention. "Fair enough, but decisions need to be made soon. Frank needs medical attention you can't provide in the field." As they carefully transferred Frank into the cabin's main room suddenly plunged into darkness. Rex's warning growl broke the silence a split second before the distinctive sound of suppressed weapons shattered the night. The safe house had been compromised. Michael reacted instantly, pulling Harris down as bullets splintered the doorframe above them. "Sarah, get down," he shouted, already drawing his weapon and assessing entry points. The attack had come without warning, no approaching vehicles, no perimeter alerts. Someone had known exactly where to find them. In the confusion of darkness and gunfire, a single chilling realization crystallized in Michael's mind. They had a traitor in their midst. "Back exit," Harris hissed, pointing toward the kitchen. "Emergency tunnel under the pantry." Michael kept his weapon trained on Harris even as bullets continued to impact the cabin's exterior. Convenient timing, he growled. Think what you want, Harris snapped, but that tunnel is our only way out. They've got the perimeter covered. Sarah had already pulled Nathan beneath a heavy oak table, the boy clutching Rex's collar tightly as the dog's hackles rose. In the bedroom, Frank had slumped to the floor beside the bed, clutching his oxygen mask with one hand and a small revolver in the other, a weapon Michael hadn't realized the old man possessed. Nathan, stay down, Michael ordered, then to Harris. You first. Any surprises, you take the bullets. Harris didn't argue, moving in a combat crouch toward the kitchen. Michael followed, covering Sarah and Nathan as they helped Frank. The old veteran's lips had taken on a blue tinge, his breathing shallow and labored. The kitchen pantry revealed a trap door beneath a worn rug. Harris pulled it open to expose a narrow tunnel supported by old timber beams. Cold War era, he explained tersely. Leads to an exit point about 80 yards west. Tight fit but passable. I'll go first, Sarah insisted, passing her father's arm to Michael. If there's anyone waiting better, I check, then risk all of us. Before Michael could protest, she had already slipped into the darkness, her medical pack slung across her shoulders, pistol leading the way. Long seconds passed before her whispered, "Clear," echoed back up the shaft. Nathan, you're next, Michael directed. Take Rex with you. The boy nodded, solemnly, pale but focused, as he climbed down the ladder, the shepherd following with surprising agility despite his age and previous injuries. Frank's condition had deteriorated significantly. Can't make the climb, he wheezed, eyes unfocused. Leave me. Not happening, Michael replied, firmly securing his weapons to free both hands. Harris, you're on rear guard. I'm taking Frank down. With practiced efficiency, Michael created a hasty harness from webbing in his tactical vest, securing Frank against his chest in a modified rappel position. The old man's weight was alarmingly light, wasted by illness and now critical exhaustion. The tunnel was a tight squeeze, barely 5 feet high, requiring them to move in a hunched position that quickly became painful. The earthen floor was slick with seeping groundwater, the air thick with the musty scent of decades-old timber and soil. Above them, the sounds of the assault continued, multiple entry points being breached simultaneously, the methodical room-clearing pattern of professional operators. They had minutes at most before the tunnel would be discovered. Sarah led the way, Nathan close behind her with Rex, while Michael struggled to maneuver Frank's increasingly limp form through the narrow passage. Harris brought up the rear, periodically glancing back to check for pursuers. How much further? Michael grunted, feeling Frank's pulse growing weaker against his arm. Exits just ahead, Harris replied, but they'll have the area surrounded by now. We need a diversion, Sarah called back. As if in answer, a tremendous explosion rocked the earth above them, sending dust and debris raining down from the tunnel ceiling. The sound of splintering wood and collapsing structure reverberated through the confined space. What the hell was that? Sarah gasped. Propane tank in the cabin, Harris explained grimly. Old agency protocol, self-destruct capability if compromised. I triggered it remotely. Michael shot him a hard look. You didn't mention that option. Need to know basis, Harris replied without apology. Now they'll be disorganized for a few minutes. We need to move fast. The tunnel exit emerged beneath a fallen log concealed by dense undergrowth. Sarah checked the perimeter before signaling them forward. The night had deepened, rain still falling steadily, reducing visibility, but also masking their heat signatures from thermal imaging. In the distance, the cabin burned furiously despite the rain, flames illuminating the chaos of injured men being evacuated and others regrouping. The explosion had been more devastating than expected, creating precious minutes of confusion they desperately needed. There's a ravine 50 yards north, Harris directed. Leads to a creek that will mask our trail. Frank had lost consciousness completely, his breathing now so shallow it was barely perceptible. Sarah checked his vitals with professional urgency. He's in cardiogenic shock, she reported, voice tight with controlled panic. We need to stabilize him immediately. No time, Harris countered, scanning the tree line. They'll regroup in minutes. He'll die without intervention, Sarah insisted. Michael made the tactical assessment instantly. Harris, you and Nathan continue to the ravine with Rex. We'll catch up. Splitting up is a mistake, Harris argued. So is watching a man die when we can prevent it, Michael snapped. Go, now. Something shifted in Harris's expression, a momentary softening of his professional mask before he nodded once. 30 minutes. Then we move with or without you. As they disappeared into the darkness, Sarah was already administering emergency medication from her pack, working with the focused intensity of a combat medic accustomed to treating critical patients under fire. Epinephrine, she explained, driving the needle directly into Frank's chest. His heart's failing. This might buy us time. Michael secured the perimeter, moving in a careful circle around their position, setting basic early warning measures, disturbed branches that would rustle if crossed a perimeter of small stones that would shift underfoot. Simple but effective. When he returned, Frank had regained consciousness, though his condition remained precarious. The old man's eyes found Michael's, a clarity in them that belied his physical state. Need to tell you, Frank whispered, grasping Michael's wrist with surprising strength. The coordinates, not just memorized, encoded. Save your strength, Michael advised, positioning himself to shield both Frank and Sarah from potential sightlines. Frank shook his head weakly. No time. Listen carefully. His voice dropped further, forcing Michael to lean in. The poem I taught Sarah as a child, The Wanderer's Path. First letter of each line combined with syllable count. Coordinates to the cave system near Laotian border. Dad, please, Sarah pleaded, continuing to monitor his vitals. Save your strength. Sarah knows it by heart. Frank continued, ignoring her. The documentation inside It's More Than Phoenix shows how they evolved into Argus, financial networks, names, enough to bring down the entire operation. That's why they want you so badly, Michael realized. Not just to find the location, but to ensure no one else can. Frank nodded weakly. Garrison is dying, wants his legacy secured, the evidence destroyed. And Carter, where does he fit? Positioned to take over. Frank's breath rattled ominously. Garrison's protege, even more dangerous. Fewer scruples, if you can imagine. The distant sound of voices and moving men penetrated the steady drum of rain. The search was reorganizing, expanding outward from the destroyed cabin. We need to move, Michael urged, gathering their minimal supplies. Sarah helped her father into a sitting position, but Frank pushed her hands away gently. I'm not going any further, he stated with quiet finality. Dad, no. I'm dying, Sarah. His voice carried the unarguable certainty of a man who had accepted his fate. Hours, maybe minutes. I'll only slow you down. We don't leave people behind, Michael insisted, echoing his earlier statement. Frank's weathered face creased in a pained smile. Sometimes the mission demands sacrifice. You know that better than most, soldier. Before either could respond, Frank pressed something into Sarah's hand, a worn leather pouch containing what appeared to be an ancient key and a small flash drive. Secondary security, he explained. Cave entrance requires both physical and digital keys. Documents were encoded 50 years ago with military-grade encryption. That drive contains the decryption key. Sarah clutched the items, tears finally breaking through her professional composure. Dad, please. Promise me you'll finish this. Frank cut her off, his voice suddenly stronger, fueled by decades of determination. Expose them all. Make it count. I promise, she whispered. Frank turned to Michael, soldier to soldier. Keep them safe. And when you find Garrison, tell him Frank Mitchell sends his regards from the grave. Michael nodded once, a warrior's acknowledgement of another's final stand. Now go, Frank ordered. I'll buy you time. How? Sarah asked, even as Michael was already pulling her to her feet, recognizing the immutable reality of their situation. Frank patted the revolver in his lap. Still remember how to make noise. Draw them this direction while you escape another way. Michael calculated rapidly, the tactical correctness of the plan warring with the ingrained imperative never to leave a man behind. But Frank was right. The mission parameters had changed. The priority now was the evidence in protecting Sarah and Nathan. 30 seconds, Michael finally said. Then we move. Sarah knelt, quickly embracing her father with fierce intensity. I love you, she whispered. Tell Nathan I'm proud of him, Frank replied, and that his grandmother would be too. Then they were moving, Michael leading Sarah in a direction perpendicular to both their pursuers and the ravine where Harris waited with Nathan. A calculated risk, dividing their group further, but also dividing the enemy's attention. They had covered perhaps 200 yards when the sharp report of Frank's revolver cut through the night. 3 shots in rapid succession, then a pause, then 2 more. The universal signal for enemy contact. Shouts erupted behind them as the search teams converged on the sound. Sarah stumbled, her professional composure finally cracking under the emotional weight. Michael caught her arm, steadying her. He made his choice, he said quietly. Honor it by completing the mission. Her eyes glistening with tears, but hardened with resolve, met his. I intend to. They continued through the forest, moving as silently as the treacherous terrain allowed, guided by Michael's unerring sense of direction and the faint glow of his tactical compass. The rain had finally ceased, leaving behind a heavy mist that swirled ghost-like among the trees. Two more shots echoed in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of automatic weapons fire. Then silence. Neither spoke. No words were necessary. 20 minutes later, they reached the ravine, where Harris waited with Nathan and Rex. The boy's face was a mask of rigid control, but his eyes asked the question he couldn't voice. Your grandfather stayed behind, Michael said quietly, not sugarcoating the truth but measuring its delivery. He bought us time to escape. Nathan nodded once, a single tear tracking down his cheek before he wiped it away with military precision. Rex pressed against the boy's leg, offering silent comfort. Harris's expression remained unreadable as his eyes met Michael's, silently acknowledging the soldier's sacrifice. We need to keep moving. There's an old logging road 2 miles west. I have a secondary vehicle cached there. Can we trust you? Sarah asked bluntly, grief transforming into focused anger. How did they find us at the safe house? Harris met her accusation with acute flinching. If I wanted you captured or dead, it would have happened already. Someone else compromised the location. Or something, Michael interjected, already checking their equipment. Could have been a tracker on the Jeep, or satellite surveillance keyed to facial recognition. Garrison clearly has resources beyond standard parameters. Harris nodded grimly. The man spent 50 years building a shadow empire from Phoenix assets. His reach is extensive. Then where can we go that's safe? Sarah demanded. Nowhere conventional, Michael decided. We stay off-grid completely. No vehicles, no structures, no traceable movement patterns. The boy can't survive extended wilderness evasion, Harris objected, glancing at Nathan. Nor can you continue without proper medical supplies, he added to Sarah. I can do whatever's necessary. Nathan spoke up suddenly, his voice steadier than any of them expected. My dad was a ranger. He taught me things before he died. Michael assessed the boy with new respect. We all have hidden strengths. There's one option, Harris said after a moment's consideration. A location completely outside official channels, not even on agency maps. Whose then? Michael pressed, suspicion evident. Mine. Personal bolt hole I established years ago. Decommissioned fire lookout tower in the Cabinet Mountains. Remote defensible supplied for extended occupation. Michael weighed the proposal. The Cabinet Mountains offered the isolation they needed, rugged, nearly impenetrable terrain far from standard routes. But trusting Harris with their final destination required a leap of faith he wasn't sure was tactically sound. How far, he asked finally. 30 miles as the crow flies. 3 days on foot given our condition. And if it's compromised like the safe house, Harris's expression hardened, then we're already dead and this conversation is academic. The harsh truth hung between them, undeniable in its finality. They had run out of better options. We move at first light, Michael decided. Find defensive shelter for what's left of the night. Reassess our supplies and capabilities. They established a temporary camp in the deepest part of the ravine where a small overhang provided minimal shelter. Sarah tended to their various injuries, Michael's lacerated forearm from the cabin escape, Harris's sprained ankle from the tunnel exit, Nathan's numerous scratches and bruises. The boy submitted to her ministrations silently, his face set in a determined mask that seemed too old for his years. Michael observed the interaction, recognizing in Nathan the same preternatural focus he'd seen in special operators, the ability to compartmentalize trauma and channel it into immediate survival needs. The boy had retreated deep within himself, yet remained functional, alert, processing. While Sarah worked, Harris produced a small tactical radio, its antiquated design suggesting Cold War origins. Low-frequency encryption protocols from the 80s, he explained, noticing Michael's attention. Theoretically untraceable with modern interception technology. Theoretically? Michael echoed skeptically. I need to check on the pursuit parameters, Harris insisted. Blind movement is tactically unsound. After a moment's consideration, Michael nodded once. Harris moved several yards away, speaking in hushed tones into the device. Michael positioned himself to observe both Harris and protect Sarah and Nathan simultaneously, hand never straying far from his weapon. "Can we trust him?" Sarah asked quietly, finishing her medical duties and settling beside Michael. "Trust is a tactical luxury," he replied. "Right now, he's a necessary resource with aligned interests." "That's not an answer." Michael's eyes never left Harris's silhouette. "He knew your father in Vietnam, CIA operative during Phoenix. That's a connection he didn't volunteer until forced. And our professional intelligence officers don't maintain decades-long covers without substantial backing. Whoever Harris really works for, it's not just the local sheriff's department." Sarah processed this, her physician's mind, analyzing variables with clinical precision. "You think he might be working against Garrison? Some kind of internal intelligence community conflict?" "Possibly. Phoenix created deep divisions within the agency. Some operators embraced the extrajudicial aspects, others were disturbed by them." Michael shifted, slightly easing the pressure on his injured arm. "Either way, he represents our best tactical option at present." "Until he doesn't," Sarah concluded grimly. "Until he doesn't," Michael agreed. Harris returned, pocketing the radio. They've expanded the search grid to 15 miles radius from the cabin. Multiple teams, satellite support, thermal imaging drones. "Excessive for recovering old Vietnam secrets," Michael noted. "It's never been just about Vietnam," Harris replied, settling across from them. "The evidence Frank secured doesn't just document Phoenix atrocities. It contains the foundational blueprint for Argus financial structures, operational protocols, personnel networks. Enough to dismantle a 50-year-old shadow organization that's embedded itself in legitimate power structures." "Including current operations," Michael surmised. Harris nodded grimly. "Argus evolved from counterinsurgency to private intelligence brokering. They sell information influence and occasionally direct action to the highest bidders, corporations, foreign governments, anyone with sufficient resources." "And Carter?" Michael asked, the name still triggering a reflexive tension in his combat-honed muscles. "Garrison's chosen successor, former CIA turned private operator. His specialty is eliminating problems with absolute deniability." Harris's expression darkened. "Your team in Afghanistan discovered one of their primary funding channels, opium shipments using military transport." The revelation settled like a physical weight on Michael's shoulders. The ambush that killed his team hadn't been random insurgent activity. It had been a deliberate elimination orchestrated by Carter to protect Argus operations. "That's why you've been watching me," he realized suddenly. "Not because the agency was concerned about a retired operator, because I was the only survivor of an Argus sanitization operation." Harris neither confirmed nor denied, but his silence was answer enough. "Wait," Sarah interjected, mind racing to connect implications. "If Carter works for Garrison and Garrison runs Argus and Argus has government connections," she paled slightly. "How high does this go?" "High enough that we're completely on our own," Harris replied matter-of-factly. "No official channels, no extraction team, no cavalry coming to the rescue." Nathan, who had been silently processing the adult conversation, suddenly spoke. "My grandfather knew all this. That's why we move so often." All eyes turned to the boy whose observational intelligence continued to surprise them. "We never stayed anywhere more than 8 months," he continued, petting Rex absently. "Mom always said it was because of her work, but Grandpa had a schedule, a pattern. I tracked it in my notebook." "What pattern, Nathan?" Michael asked gently. "Every time someone official visited or asked questions, 3 days later, we'd move." The boy's methodical mind had cataloged what the adults had missed, sometimes less if the questions were about Vietnam. Sarah's expression reflected dawning comprehension. "I thought it was paranoia from his PTSD. Military hospital specialists. I never realized." "He was keeping you safe," Michael concluded, "staying ahead of Argus surveillance." "Until his cancer diagnosis," Harris added. "Medical records are surprisingly easy to access with the right resources." Garrison would have known Frank's condition was terminal, accelerated the timetable to locate the evidence before it was lost forever. The full tactical picture was clarifying in Michael's mind, not just a simple pursuit of old secrets, but a complex convergence of past and present, with Sarah and Nathan caught in the crossfire of something far larger than they'd imagined. "We need to recover that evidence," he decided. Not just for Frank's vindication, but because it's our only leverage. Leverage? Sarah questioned. Garrison won't stop hunting you as long as you potentially know the location. Carter won't stop hunting me because I'm a loose end from Afghanistan. Our only option is to recover the evidence and use it as insurance. Harris nodded in agreement. Mutually assured destruction. Make copies, establish dead man switches, ensure the information goes public if anything happens to any of us. Can you access the evidence repository from your Vietnam memories? Michael asked Sarah directly. She nodded slowly. The poem, I've known it my entire life. My father made me memorize it when I was 6. I never understood why it was so important to him. It's a mnemonic encryption key, Harris explained. Standard intelligence tradecraft from that era. The syllable patterns, first letters, cadence, all part of a coordinate and access code system. And combined with the physical key and flash drive he gave you, Michael added, we have everything needed to access the cache. Except transportation to Southeast Asia, Sarah pointed out pragmatically. We can barely make it 30 miles to a fire tower, let alone to Vietnam. One problem at a time, Michael replied, military prioritization kicking in. First, we survive the immediate threat. Reach the tower, regroup, reassess resources. And if they find us before then? Nathan asked the question, hanging heavy in the pre-dawn darkness. Michael's hand rested briefly on the boy's shoulder, an unprecedented gesture of connection from a man who had avoided human contact for 5 years. Then we make your grandfather proud. The first pale light of dawn found them already moving, following Harris's lead through increasingly rugged terrain. They traveled in tactical silence, conserving energy and maintaining vigilance. Michael ranged ahead periodically, checking for signs of pursuit or surveillance, while Rex stayed close to Nathan, the shepherd's military training, evident in his alert posture and periodic perimeter checks. By midday, they had covered nearly 10 miles, pushing their bodies to the limit of endurance. Sarah monitored everyone's condition with professional detachment, insisting on brief rest periods despite Harris's urgency to continue. Exhaustion compromises tactical judgment, she reminded them during one such break. 5 minutes of rest now prevents critical mistakes later. They had entered the densest part of the national forest, where decades of conservation had created an almost primeval landscape. Ancient pines towered overhead, their dense canopy offering both concealment from aerial observation and challenging navigation. Harris led them along game trails and forgotten logging paths, his knowledge of the terrain suggesting years of careful mapping and exploration. Occasionally, he would stop, consult a small topographical map, and adjust their course with measured precision. You've spent a lot of time in these woods for a small-town sheriff, Michael observed during one such pause. Harris offered a thin smile. Cover identities work best when they align with natural inclinations. I've always preferred wilderness to civilization. And what were you before you became a sheriff? Sarah asked, distributing small portions of their dwindling water supply. Many things, Harris replied cryptically, most of which remain classified. CIA, Nathan stated with unexpected certainty. The adults turned to him in surprise. Grandpa had a picture of you, younger, different name under it, in his locked box with his medals. Harris's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes reassessed the boy with new calculation. Your grandfather kept interesting mementos. He said some people pretend to be someone else for so long, they forget who they really are. Nathan continued, his perfect recall evident. Are you one of those people, Sheriff Harris? The question hung in the air, unexpectedly profound from a 12-year-old. Harris's customary professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing something like regret beneath. Perhaps we all are in different ways, he finally answered. The unexpected philosophical turn was interrupted by Rex's sudden alertness. The shepherd's ears pricked forward, body tensing, as he stared intently into the forest ahead. Michael immediately signaled for silence, moving forward in a combat crouch to investigate. The others remained frozen in place, Harris drawing his weapon as a precaution. Long minutes passed before Michael returned, his expression grim. Patrol, 2 men, tactical gear, communication equipment, moving in a standard search pattern approximately half a mile ahead. They've expanded the search perimeter faster than anticipated, Harris muttered. Or they predicted our destination. Michael countered, the implication clear. Impossible, Harris insisted. The tower location is completely off record. Nothing is completely off record, Michael replied. Change of plans. We divert east, create a false trail, then double back northwest after dark. That adds at least a day to our journey, Harris objected. Supplies are already minimal. Better hungry than captured, Sarah interjected, already helping Nathan secure his pack. Michael nodded once in agreement. We can supplement with foraging. I spotted edible plants along our route. The revised plan required them to backtrack partially, then create an obvious trail heading east. Deliberately broken branches, disturbed underbrush, even a partial boot print in soft earth. Michael implemented the deception with the precision of an operator accustomed to manipulating enemy intelligence. Once satisfied with the false trail, they doubled back, using extreme movement discipline, stepping only on solid surfaces, avoiding any action that might leave discernible signs of passage. Progress slowed to a crawl, but tactical necessity overrode speed considerations. By late afternoon, dark clouds had gathered overhead, promising another drenching. While problematic for comfort, the weather offered tactical advantages: reduced visibility for searchers, degraded electronic surveillance capabilities, and natural concealment of their trail. They found temporary shelter beneath a massive fallen sequoia, its upturned root system creating a natural windbreak. As rain began to fall in earnest, they huddled in its meager protection, conserving body heat and assessing their situation. How long can they maintain this search intensity? Sarah asked, helping Nathan into a dry layer from her pack. Indefinitely, Vassal, Harris replied grimly. Garrison's resources are substantial, and this is existential for him. Cancer gives him perhaps 2 months. He'll commit everything to finding the evidence before he dies. And ensuring his legacy through Carter, Michael added, the name still bitter on his tongue. Carter, Nathan repeated softly, opening his sketchbook to a detailed drawing that stopped the adult's cold. On the page, rendered with remarkable precision, was Carter's face, not as he appeared now, but as he had 5 years earlier in Afghanistan. The drawing captured every detail from his military haircut to the specific pattern of tactical gear he'd worn during operations. Nathan, Michael said carefully, how do you know this face? The boy's solemn eyes met his directly for the first time. From the photographs in my dad's things. Mom keeps them in a locked box, but I found the key once. Sarah's breath caught audibly. Nathan, you never told me. The man in the pictures was with Dad's team. Nathan continued, focused entirely on Michael now. Mom said Dad's unit was killed by insurgents, but this man, he tapped Carter's face. He's still alive. I saw him in town last month watching our house. The implications crashed over them like a physical wave. Carter hadn't just been hunting Frank Mitchell for the Phoenix evidence. He'd been eliminating all potential witnesses and loose ends, including the family of Nathan's father, who had apparently served with the Michaels unit in Afghanistan. Your husband, Michael said slowly to Sarah, was Army Rangers attached to Special Operations Support, Afghanistan, Helmand Province. It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway, face pale with delayed realization. James Mitchell, killed in action 5 years ago. His body was... She swallowed hard. They said the insurgent attack was so devastating there was barely anything to recover. Because it wasn't insurgents, Michael concluded, the final pieces locking into place. It was a professional sanitization operation. Carter eliminating an entire team that had stumbled onto Argus activities. James was your teammate, Sarah whispered, the connection between past and present finally crystallizing. Michael shook his head slowly. Support attachment, communications specialist. He monitored chatter-intercepted transmissions. Must have picked up something relating to the opium shipments. He sent files home, Nathan said suddenly, his perfect memory supplying critical information. Before he died, told Mom they were insurance. She never opened them, said it was too painful. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The external hard drive. In his effects. I keep it with his medals and letters. Where? Michael asked urgently. Safety deposit box. Clearwater National Bank. Her eyes widened in dismay. They'll have accessed it by now. Harris, who had been listening intently, shook his head. Not necessarily. Safety deposit boxes require court orders to access even for federal agencies. Argus would avoid official channels that might create records. Unless they have someone inside the bank, Michael pointed out. Garrison's reach is extensive but not omnipotent, Harris countered. Small-town banks, limited personnel, establish protocols. They'll prioritize direct pursuit over secondary evidence collection. The rain intensified, drumming against the fallen tree and cascading in sheets that created a natural curtain around their shelter. The temperature had dropped noticeably, adding hypothermia to their list of immediate concerns. "We need fire," Sarah stated, professional medical assessment, overriding tactical considerations. "Nathan's core temperature is dropping. So is mine." "Fire creates detection risk," Harris objected. "Hypothermia creates mission failure risk," she countered sharply. "Choose." Michael made the decision. "Dakota Firehole, minimal signature, maximum heat retention." He turned to Nathan. "Can you help me gather dry material from under the root system?" The boy nodded eagerly, clearly relieved to have a concrete task. As they collected potential fuel, Michael observed Nathan's methodical approach, testing each piece for moisture content, selecting only the driest options, categorizing by size for optimal burning sequence. The same detail-oriented focus that made his autism challenging in social situations made him exceptionally effective in survival contexts. "You're good at this," Michael noted quietly. Nathan didn't look up from his task. "Dad taught me, said details matter in the field." He was right. "Mom thinks I don't remember him well." The boy continued, arranging his collected materials with precise care. "But I remember everything. The way he checked sight lines before entering rooms, how he positioned himself with his back to walls, the nightmares that sometimes made him call out names." The description struck uncomfortably close to Michael's own behaviors, the hypervigilance, tactical positioning, and haunted sleep that characterized those who had seen too much combat. "He sounds like a good soldier," Michael offered, unsure how to respond to the boy's unexpected openness. Nathan finally looked up, his eyes reflecting a wisdom beyond his years. "He wasn't always a soldier around me. Sometimes he was just Dad." The simple statement carried profound weight, a reminder of the compartmentalized lives operators led warriors in the field, fathers at home, the boundaries between sometimes blurring with tragic consequences. Michael felt something shift inside him, a crack in the walls he'd built around his emotional landscape since Afghanistan. This boy, this son of a fallen comrade, represented both the cost of their profession and its purpose. The people they fought to protect, the futures they sacrificed to secure. "Your father would be proud of you," Michael said, the words emerging unbidden, yet absolute in their conviction. "You've got his strength." Nathan accepted the praise with solemn dignity, returning to his task with renewed focus. When they rejoined the others, Michael efficiently constructed a Dakota Firehole, a specialized underground fire pit that directed smoke through a secondary air shaft, minimizing visible signature while maximizing heat. Soon a small but intense heat source provided crucial warmth to their shelter without betraying their position. As night descended, they established a watch rotation, Michael first, then Harry's, with Sarah taking the pre-dawn shift. Nathan protested being excluded, but eventually succumbed to exhaustion, curled against Rex's solid warmth for additional heat. During his watch, Michael observed the sleeping group with tactical assessment that gradually shifted to something more personal. Sarah's protective posture, even in sleep, one arm draped across her son. Nathan's face momentarily peaceful, the worry lines smoothed away. Harris's disciplined stillness betraying years of field experience, even in repose. Rex ever vigilant despite closed eyes, ears twitching at the slightest sound. For 5 years, Michael had existed in isolated detachment, human connections severed as completely as his former identity. Now circumstances had forced him into an unwanted interdependence with these 3 humans and 1 loyal animal. The tactical vulnerability of attachment warred with the undeniable asset of combined capabilities. His thoughts turned to Carter, the brother-in-arms turned betrayer, the face that haunted his nightmares. The revelation of Carter's connection to Argus explained the perfect execution of the Afghanistan ambush, but opened deeper questions about the true extent of the Shadow Organization's reach and resources. If Carter had been embedded within special operations teams to monitor potential threats to Argus activities, how many other operators might be similarly compromised? How extensive was the infiltration of legitimate military and intelligence structures? The implications were staggering. A half-century-old covert network evolved from Phoenix, with tentacles extending into modern operations, governance, and finance. Frank Mitchell's evidence repository represented more than historical accountability. It potentially documented the evolution of a parallel power structure operating beyond democratic oversight. Harris stirred precisely on schedule, transitioning to wakefulness with the practiced efficiency of a career operative. He moved silently to relieve Michael at the watch position, exchanging only the briefest nod of acknowledgement. Any movement? Harris whispered. Nothing within perimeter, Michael replied equally quietly. Rains masking most ambient sound beyond 50 yards. Harris settled into position, checking his weapon with automatic precision. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be demanding. Michael hesitated, then voiced the question that had been forming throughout his watch. Vietnam. You were there when Frank's unit secured the Phoenix documentation. You were supposed to receive it at extraction. It wasn't technically a question, but Harris understood the implied inquiry. After a long moment, he responded, I was a true believer initially, recruited straight from college, bright, patriotic, convinced we were fighting necessary battles against communist expansion. The admission carried the weight of decades-old disillusionment. By 72, I'd seen enough to question the program's methods and objectives. When I realized what the Phoenix documentation contained evidence of operations that violated every principle I thought we were defending, I made a choice. You helped Frank hide it, Michael concluded. Harris nodded, once gaze fixed on the rain-drenched darkness beyond their shelter. Garrison was already consolidating power using Phoenix assets for personal enrichment and influence. The evidence would have exposed operations that crossed every legal and moral boundary, assassination programs, targeting non-combatants, drug trafficking, to fund black operations, experimental weapons testing on civilian populations. And you've been looking for it ever since. A grim smile touched Harris's mouth. 50 years is a long time to chase ghosts. Careers built and destroyed, covers established and abandoned. Always one step behind Garrison's cleanup teams. Why not just let it go? Michael asked. After so many decades, most of the principals would be dead or beyond prosecution. Harris turned to face him directly, the dim firelight catching the steel in his eyes. Because systems outlive individuals. Phoenix became Argus. Argus embedded itself in legitimate power structures. The methods evolved, but the fundamental corruption remained unaccountable, power operating beyond democratic oversight. The conviction in his voice carried the unmistakable weight of a life's mission, something Michael recognized from operators he'd known who were driven by purpose rather than mere duty. Frank trusted you, Michael observed, despite everything. Frank understood necessary compromises, Harris replied, the gray areas where operational realities meet ethical imperatives. Michael considered this the professional assessment of a fellow operator rather than moral judgment. And now we complete what Frank started 50 years ago, recover the evidence, expose Argus, finish the mission. The simple declaration carried the weight of a lifetime's dedication, a through line of purpose connecting Vietnam to Montana, binding together the disparate individuals sheltered beneath the fallen sequoia. Michael nodded once in acknowledgement, then settled into the minimal comfort of his allocated sleeping space. As consciousness began to fade, his tactical mind continued processing variables and contingencies. But beneath that professional calculation, something else stirred, a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. For the first time in 5 years, Ghost wasn't just running from his past. He was confronting it. The rain continued its steady percussion against their natural shelter, masking their presence from those who hunted them through the darkened forest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, tactical decisions, and potential confrontations. But for now, in this moment of temporary security, 4 humans and 1 loyal shepherd had formed an unlikely alliance against a common enemy. An old soldier's final mission passed to the next generation. A quest for truth buried for half a century. A reckoning for betrayals both personal and institutional. And for Michael Ghost Reeves, perhaps a path toward redemption. Dawn broke reluctantly through heavy cloud cover, casting the forest in muted grays. They moved out silently, Harris leading with his uncanny knowledge of the terrain, Michael covering their rear. Nathan stayed between them with Rex, while Sarah maintained vigilant watch over her increasingly exhausted son. The previous day's rain had transformed the forest floor into treacherous mud, slowing their progress, but also obscuring their trail. By mid-morning, they had covered only 4 miles of difficult terrain, pushing deeper into the Cabinet Mountains wilderness. We need to adjust our route, Harris announced during a brief rest, consulting his tattered map. Standard search protocols will have teams establishing containment lines along major geographical features. River to the east, ridge system to the west. Michael nodded in agreement. They'll expect us to follow paths of least resistance. We go perpendicular straight up the steepest section. Sarah glanced at Nathan, concern evident. The boy's face was drawn with fatigue, though he hadn't uttered a single complaint. He needs proper rest food. 6 more hours, Harris replied. If we maintain pace, we'll reach the tower by nightfall. They continued their grueling ascent, the landscape growing increasingly vertical. Michael took point on the steepest sections, establishing handholds and supporting Nathan through particularly difficult passages. The boy's determination never wavered, even as exhaustion etched itself deeper into his young features. By mid-afternoon, they had gained significant elevation, the forest thinning as they approached alpine conditions. Harris called another brief halt, pointing toward a rocky outcropping that offered momentary shelter and a vantage point. We're approximately 5 miles from the tower, he informed them. Terrain levels out after the next ridge, primarily alpine meadow with scattered tree cover. Limited concealment, Michael noted with professional concern. Unavoidable given the elevation, Harris acknowledged, but it also provides better visibility against potential pursuit. As they rested, Nathan opened his sketchbook, methodically documenting their journey with remarkable precision, detailed renderings of key landmarks, notations on terrain features, even small wildlife observations. The activity seemed to center him, providing focus amid the stress of their situation. Sarah settled beside Michael, voice low to avoid disturbing her son's concentration. He's processing everything through his drawings, always has. His therapist says it's how he makes sense of the world. Michael watched the boy's precise movements, recognizing the tactical value of such meticulous observation. Useful skill in the field. He's like his father that way, Sarah continued softly. James could remember every detail of an operation, faces, locations, conversations. Perfect recall. Valuable in communications intelligence, Michael noted. Pattern recognition, anomaly detection. Sarah studied him carefully. You didn't know him well, did you? Despite serving together. Michael hesitated, weighing operational secrecy against the truth this family deserved. Different operational elements, limited direct contact, but his reputation was exceptional. The partial truth seemed to satisfy her, though Michael suspected she understood the compartmentalized nature of special operations well enough to read between the lines. Their moment of relative calm was shattered by Rex's sudden alertness. The shepherd's ears pricked forward, body tensing, as he stared intently northward. No growl, no bark, just the focused attention of a military working dog detecting potential threat. Michael immediately signaled for silence, moving to a better vantage point to scan their surroundings. Harris joined him, both men assessing with professional precision. 2 o'clock near the lightning-struck pine, Harris murmured eventually. Single observer, with optics. Michael spotted the figure, partially concealed, professional positioning, methodically scanning the ridgeline with high-powered binoculars. Not a casual hiker or Forest Service personnel. Advanced scout, Michael concluded grimly, establishing search parameters. They've expanded faster than anticipated, Harris agreed. We need to move immediately, use the ridgeline for cover before they call in additional assets. Michael returned to Sarah and Nathan, already gathering their minimal gear. Quick and silent, he instructed. Stay low, single file, maintain intervals. They moved with renewed urgency, using natural features for concealment as they traversed the exposed ridgeline. Nathan kept pace admirably, his earlier fatigue seemingly forgotten in the face of immediate danger. Rex ranged slightly ahead, his military training evident in how he moved, low-profile alert to potential threats, occasionally pausing to test wind direction for sense. As they crested the ridge, the landscape opened before them, a vast alpine meadow dotted with stunted pines and rocky outcroppings stretching toward distant peaks. And there, barely visible on a rocky prominence 3 miles distant, stood a solitary structure, the Fire Lookout Tower, their destination. We'll be completely exposed crossing the meadow, Sarah observed with a concern. No choice, Harris replied tersely. Night crossing would be safer, but impossible to navigate accurately. One wrong turn in the dark could add hours or send us off a cliff face. Michael assessed the tactical situation rapidly. We split up, create multiple movement patterns, confuse any observers, converge at the tower. Splitting up is tactically unsound with limited personnel, Harris objected. So is presenting a single target group across open terrain, Michael countered. Sarah and Nathan head straight across, following the tree line for maximum cover. You circle west using the rock formations. I'll create a diversion, east, draw attention if there are additional observers. Harris's expression revealed professional disagreement, but reluctant acceptance of the tactical necessity. And if one group encounters hostiles, emergency signal 3 short whistle blasts, Michael decided. Immediate converge and defensive positioning. Sarah checked her weapon with practiced efficiency, then secured Nathan's backpack straps. Stay close to me, she instructed her son. Move exactly as I move, stop when I stop. The boy nodded solemnly, eyes fixed on the distant tower with singular determination. Rex, sensing the impending separation, whined softly, looking between Michael and Nathan with evident confusion. Rex stays with you, Michael told Nathan, making a quick tactical decision. He'll warn you of dangers before you see them. The shepherd's ears perked at his name, awaiting specific instruction. Michael gave the hand signal for guard duty, pointing to Nathan. Rex immediately moved to the boy's side, body language shifting to protective alertness. We regroup at the tower before full dark, Michael confirmed, checking his watch. Move out in sequential intervals 30 seconds apart. Sarah and Nathan first, then Harris, then me. As Sarah and Nathan began their cautious advance into the meadow, Michael caught Harris's arm, voice dropping to ensure privacy. If this is a trap, if you've led us into an ambush, I'll kill you before they take me down. Harris met his gaze without flinching. If I wanted you dead, Ghost, I wouldn't have waited 3 days in the wilderness to arrange it. The cold logic was undeniable. Michael released his grip with a curt nod, and Harris began his westward route 30 seconds later. Left momentarily alone on the ridgeline, Michael surveyed the vast expanse before him. 5 years of self-imposed isolation had dulled something essential in him, the connection to others that gave purpose beyond mere survival. Now watching Sarah and Nathan making their careful way across the meadow, he felt the weight of responsibility settling across his shoulders like a familiar rucksack. These people were his mission now, their survival his purpose. Michael began his eastern diversion, moving with the fluid efficiency that had earned him the call sign Ghost years earlier. Where Sarah maintained concealment and Harris used terrain features, Michael implemented distraction, periodically visible, then vanishing, creating a movement pattern designed to draw attention while revealing nothing of their actual objective. The sun had begun its westward descent, casting longer shadows across the meadow, when Michael detected the first sign of pursuit, a brief radio transmission echo carried on the wind, too distant to discern words but unmistakably tactical in its brevity and timing. He increased his pace, angling to intercept Sarah and Nathan's route. They had covered approximately 2/3 of the distance to the tower, making remarkable progress given the difficult terrain and need for concealment. When he reached them, Nathan was visibly struggling, despite his determined silence. The boy's reserves were depleting rapidly, the cumulative effects of days without adequate rest or nutrition finally taking their toll. I can carry him, Michael offered, noting Sarah's own exhaustion. She shook her head stubbornly. We'll manage. How close is pursuit? Close enough. We need to move faster. Sarah nodded grimly, then knelt before Nathan. Sweetheart, Michael's going to carry you for a while. It's not because you're not strong enough. You've been braver than most grown men I know, but we need to move quickly now. The boy's resistance was evident in his expression, but he nodded, once practical necessity overriding pride. Michael hoisted him onto his back in a modified fireman's carry that distributed weight efficiently while leaving one hand free for his weapon if needed. Nathan weighed less than expected, his small frame concealing remarkable resilience. Rex adjusted immediately now, ranging ahead and behind alternately, covering their movement with military precision. They increased their pace significantly, abandoning some concealment for speed. The tower grew larger against the darkening sky, its weathered structure a beacon of potential safety in the vast wilderness. Harris was already there, concealed among rocks at the base, weapon ready as they approached. Pursuit? He asked tersely. But not immediate, Michael confirmed carefully, lowering Nathan to the ground. How secure is the tower? Single access point, defensible staircase, reinforced upper level with 360-degree visibility, Harris replied. Stocked with essentials, water shelf stable food, medical supplies, ammunition. And if they found it before us, Sarah asked the question they had all been considering. Harris's expression remained impassive. Then we'll know very quickly. They approached the tower with tactical caution, Michael on point, Harris covering Sarah and Nathan protected between them, Rex scouting ahead. The structure stood approximately 40 feet tall, its weathered timber frame rising to a small enclosed observation room at the top. A single staircase spiraled upward along the exterior, exposed and vulnerable during ascent, but offering excellent defensive positioning once secured. Michael conducted a careful perimeter check, finding no signs of recent human presence, no disturbed ground, no discarded items, no altered vegetation patterns. Either the location remained truly secure, or any visitors had been exceptionally careful to leave no trace. Clear to approach, he signaled finally. Harris, you lead. I'll cover from ground level until everyone's up. Harris ascended first, moving with practiced efficiency despite his earlier injury. Sarah helped Nathan start the climb, the boy summoning remarkable determination despite near exhaustion. Rex followed, navigating the open-treaded stairs with surprising agility for an aging shepherd. Michael maintained vigilant watch, scanning the surrounding meadow for any sign of pursuit. The lengthening shadows created ideal conditions for approach. Neither full daylight nor complete darkness, but the transitional illumination that complicated surveillance. Once the others had reached the top, Michael began his own ascent, backing up the stairs to maintain visual coverage of the approaches. As he reached the halfway point, a flash of movement at the meadow's edge caught his attention, too deliberate to be wildlife, too controlled to be casual. By the time he reached the top platform, he was certain they had been followed. The tower's observation room was approximately 15 feet square. Its walls comprised primarily of windows to allow fire spotters 360-degree visibility. Basic amenities lined the interior: a small propane stove, storage cabinets, narrow-cock communications equipment long since disabled. Harris had already secured the entry hatch and was distributing supplies from a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. "We have company," Michael announced without preamble. "At least one observer at the meadow perimeter, likely more approaching." Harris nodded grimly, continuing to retrieve equipment. "Expected. This position is defensible for 72 hours minimum. Enough time to formulate next steps." Sarah had already established a medical triage area, examining Nathan for signs of dehydration or injury. The boy submitted to her examination with exhausted compliance, too tired even for his usual resistance to being touched. "He needs food, water, and rest," she reported. "No serious physical issues, but he's running on empty." Harris produced sealed ration packs and water purification tablets. Limited supply, but sufficient for immediate needs. As they organized their temporary sanctuary, Michael maintained surveillance from each window in sequence, mapping potential approach vectors and defensive options. The tower's elevation provided significant tactical advantage, but also made them a clear target once their position was confirmed. Night fell completely as they finished their minimal meal, the vast wilderness disappearing into darkness, broken only by stars and a quarter moon partially obscured by lingering clouds. Nathan had fallen into exhausted sleep almost immediately after eating, curled on the narrow cot with Rex protectively beside him. Sarah joined Michael at the western window, her voice pitched low to avoid disturbing her son. "How bad is our situation?" He appreciated her directness, no false reassurance needed or expected. "Containable for now. They'll establish surveillance overnight, likely attempt approach by morning. This position gives us significant defensive advantage against direct assault. But we're still trapped," she concluded, "surrounded, outnumbered, with limited supplies." "Tactically challenged," Michael corrected, "not defeated." A ghost of a smile touched her lips at his professional understatement. "Is that what they taught you in Delta Redefine, but impossible situations as tactically challenged?" "Something like that." Harris approached, interrupting their momentary connection. "We need to discuss next steps, specifically what happens with the evidence once we secure it." Michael turned from the window, assessing the former intelligence officer with renewed caution. "Assuming we access the repository in Vietnam, what's your proposed handling protocol?" "Full public disclosure," Harris replied without hesitation. "Unredacted documentation provided simultaneously to multiple international news organizations, oversight committees, and legal authorities. Complete transparency." That contradicts standard intelligence community protocols," Michael observed. Harris's expression hardened. "I stopped serving standard protocols 50 years ago when I realized what they concealed. This isn't about national security. It's about accountability for crimes committed under its convenient protection." Sarah interjected, her mind processing operational implications. "Exposure would create international diplomatic issues. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. Historical operations with modern consequences." "Necessary consequences," Harris countered. Phoenix created the operational template for extrajudicial activities that continue today. Argus merely perfected the model, privatizing what began as government overreach. The fundamental question remained unspoken. But evident, was Harris a true believer in accountability? Or was this elaborate operation serving some deeper agenda they couldn't yet discern? Michael made his tactical decision. First priority is survival. Second is securing the evidence. Disposition decisions come after both are accomplished. Harris accepted this with a professional nod, recognizing the practical prioritization. Fair assessment. In that case, we should discuss immediate defensive options. I count at least 3 observers establishing positions around the meadow perimeter. Their tactical planning continued in hushed tones as the night deepened around the isolated tower. Michael established watch rotations, inventory management protocols, and defensive positioning options. Despite their precarious situation, the familiar rhythm of operational planning provided structure amid uncertainty. During his first watch shift, Michael found himself observing the sleeping forms of his unexpected companions. Sarah's protective position near her son, one hand resting on her holstered weapon even in sleep. Nathan's finally peaceful expression, the constant vigilance temporarily surrendered to exhaustion. Rex maintaining guard position despite closed eyes, the shepherd's ears twitching at every sound. Even Harris slept with professional discipline, back-to-wall position for immediate response if needed. 5 years of self-imposed isolation had been Michael's attempt to escape the ghosts of Afghanistan. Now circumstances had forced him back into the world of tactical decisions, operational judgments, and human connections, the very elements he had fled. Yet instead of triggering the expected psychological distress, the return to operational status had awakened something long dormant. Purpose, clarity, direction. The pre-dawn hours brought a change in the weather, thickening clouds, dropping temperature, and the distinctive atmospheric pressure that preceded mountain storms. Michael tracked these developments with tactical assessment. Reduced visibility would complicate enemy approach, but also limit their own observation capabilities. Harris relieved him precisely on schedule, moving with the silent efficiency of a career operative. "Stormfront moving in," Michael reported quietly. 2 hours maximum before we lose clear sight lines. Harris nodded, assuming the observation position. Tactical complication or opportunity, depending on how we leverage it. We should consider proactive movement rather than static defense, Michael suggested. Use the weather as concealment for strategic repositioning. Risky with the boys' condition, Harris countered, and we'd be abandoning our primary defensive advantage. Their professional disagreement was interrupted by Nathan's sudden wakefulness. The boy sat up abruptly, eyes wide with an urgency that immediately drew their attention. "Someone's coming," he whispered, voice tight with certainty. "I heard them." Michael and Harris exchanged glances, both having detected nothing unusual. Rex, however, had risen to full alertness, ears forward, body tense with the focused attention that validated Nathan's warning. Moving silently to the eastern window, Michael conducted a careful scan using the night vision monocular from Harris's supplies. Initially, he saw nothing beyond the expected observation positions, but then a flicker of movement closer than anticipated. Much closer. "They've advanced under cover of darkness," he confirmed grimly. "Multiple hostiles approaching from 3 vectors, approximately 200 yards out and closing." Harris immediately moved to wake Sarah, who transitioned from sleep to full alertness with military efficiency. "Situation: imminent contact," Michael replied, continuing his surveillance. "At least 6 operators in tactical formation using terrain features for concealment." "How did they advance without triggering our perimeter awareness?" Harris asked, the professional frustration evident in his tone. "Because they're not random mercenaries," Michael realized suddenly, focusing the monocular on the lead figure's movement pattern. "That's Carter's direct action team, Afghanistan veterans, specialized in covert approach and asset capture." The tactical situation had deteriorated from concerning to critical. These weren't ordinary operators, but specialized personnel with advanced training in precisely the type of operation currently unfolding. "Options?" Sarah asked, checking her weapon with practiced hands. Michael assessed rapidly. "Defensive hold unlikely to succeed against this team configuration. They'll have specialized breaching equipment, tactical coordination, potentially air support once they establish position." "We run," Harris concluded, already gathering essential supplies. Use the approaching storm as cover break contact, establish secondary position. Where, Sarah pressed, we're surrounded in open terrain with a physically exhausted child. Nathan, who had been listening intently, spoke up with unexpected steadiness. The cave system. Northeast slope. I saw it in the rock face yesterday during our approach. All eyes turned to the boy whose perfect recall and observational skills continued to surprise them. Approximately half a mile, Nathan continued, pointing with a precise direction. Natural formation, multiple possible entrances, based on water erosion patterns. Defensible, concealed, with potential for deeper penetration if necessary. Harris checked his topographical map with new respect for the boy's assessment. He's right, limestone formation, likely extensive cave network. Not marked on standard maps, but consistent with geological surveys I've reviewed. Michael made the tactical decision. We move now before they close the perimeter. Use the tower as false focal point, leave minimal equipment to suggest continued occupation. The plan formed with a rapid efficiency. Sarah and Nathan would depart first, using the tower's blindside to begin their movement toward the cave system. Harris would follow, establishing a flanking position to provide covering fire if needed. Michael would remain slightly longer, creating the impression of continued occupation before executing a delayed withdrawal. Rex goes with you, Michael told Nathan, recognizing the boy's bond with the shepherd had become a source of strength rather than vulnerability. He'll warn you of threats before you see them. As Sarah and Nathan prepared to depart, the boy suddenly turned to Michael, unexpected emotion breaking through his typically controlled expression. "You'll follow us?" he asked, the fear of abandonment evident beneath the simple question. Michael met his gaze directly. "I promise." The simple affirmation carried weight beyond its words, an echo of commitments made and broken in Afghanistan, a chance at redemption through this unexpected connection. Sarah and Nathan descended the tower stairs with tactical discipline that would have impressed seasoned operators, using the structure's bulk to shield their movement from observation. Rex followed silently, the military training evident in his positioning and awareness. Harris departed 5 minutes later, establishing a different movement vector that would eventually converge with Sarah's route. The diversified approach would complicate enemy tracking and create multiple potential targets rather than a single group. Left alone in the tower, Michael implemented the deception elements of their plan, arranging equipment to suggest continued occupation, establishing false heat signatures using chemical warming packs, creating periodic movement shadows visible from outside. The approaching storm accelerated, heavy clouds now obscuring most ambient light, wind beginning to gust with increasing intensity. Perfect conditions for breaking contact, though equally challenging for navigation. Michael was preparing for his own departure when he detected a transmission on the tactical frequency Harris had established for their communications. Not voice, a simple click pattern that alerted without revealing position. Warning, immediately dropping to a prone position, Michael maintained observation through the lowest window panel. The approaching team had accelerated their advance, now moving with less concealment and more speed. Something had altered their tactical approach. The realization struck with cold certainty. They knew the tower was being evacuated. Somehow they had detected the departures despite all precautions. Michael keyed his own transmitter, sending the predetermined danger signal to warn the others. Then he made his tactical decision, not withdrawal but engagement. Create a diversion substantial enough to ensure the others reach the cave system. Checking his limited armament and positioning, Michael prepared for what veterans called a hard contact, direct engagement with superior forces, minimal support, high risk. The type of operation that earned operators like him their reputation and too often their memorials. The first attacker reached the base of the tower 3 minutes later, maintaining tactical discipline, but moving with the confidence of someone believing they held superiority. Michael allowed him to begin the ascent before taking action, a controlled pair of shots that sent the man tumbling back to ground level. Immediate reaction fire peppered the tower from multiple positions, professional suppression techniques designed to pin down defenders while assault teams maneuvered. Michael changed positions rapidly, returning fire from different windows to create the impression of multiple defenders. Through his scope, he identified Carter directing the operation from a covered position approximately 100 yards out, close enough for operational control, but protected from direct engagement. The familiar face triggered a momentary flash of Afghanistan memories: the ambush, the betrayal, the faces of teammates who never return home. Michael channeled the emotional response into tactical focus, continuing his defensive fire while monitoring the team's movement patterns. They were establishing a standard containment formation, three-point coverage, with designated sectors of fire methodically eliminating escape vectors. The storm broke fully, rain lashing against the tower windows in wind-driven sheets that reduced visibility to mere yards. Michael used the opportunity to prepare his extraction, not down the stairs where they would expect, but through a maintenance hatch in the tower roof that Harris had identified during their initial assessment. As the assault team prepared for a coordinated breach, Michael slipped through the hatch using the tower's structural elements for concealment as he navigated to the rear support post. The driving rain masked his movement, while the team's focus on the main entrance created the critical seconds needed for his descent. He had nearly reached ground level when a voice cut through the storm's cacophony. "Still prefer the high ground, Ghost." Carter stood 20 feet away, partially sheltered beneath a stunted pine rifle held casually but ready. Not pointing directly at Michael, a deliberate choice that spoke of confidence rather than carelessness. "Old habits," Michael replied, completing his descent with measured control, mind-calculating distances and reaction times. 5 years hiding in Montana." Carter continued conversationally as if they were old friends catching up rather than adversaries in a life-or-death confrontation. "I'm almost impressed. Most operators go to South America or Southeast Asia when they ghost their own agencies." "Wasn't hiding," Michael corrected, stepping away from the tower's base to establish proper fighting distance. "Just finished with certain associations." Carter's smile never reached his eyes. "And yet here you are right back in the game, protecting Mitchell's family, chasing old Phoenix ghosts. Some retirements don't take, I guess." The tactical situation was clear. Carter's team had the tower surrounded, but their focus on the structure had created a potential blind spot on this side. If Michael could neutralize Carter quickly enough, he might still break contact and rendezvous with the others. "Why Frank Mitchell?" Michael asked, maintaining conversational tone while assessing options. "Old man with terminal cancer, decades-old secrets. Hardly seems worth Argus resources." "It's not about Mitchell," Carter replied, shifting slightly to maintain optimal position as Michael moved. "It's about what he knows, what he can access, documentation that would be inconvenient for certain ongoing operations." "Argus operations," Michael clarified, "Phoenix's corporate successor." Carter's expression registered momentary surprise before returning to professional neutrality. "You've been briefed more thoroughly than expected. Harris's contribution, I assume." Michael neither confirmed nor denied, maintaining tactical ambiguity. "Seems excessive deploying a direct action team for historical documentation retrieval." "That's because you're still thinking like a soldier ghost, following rules, respecting boundaries, serving abstract principles." Carter's tone carried the patronizing edge of someone explaining basic concepts. "Argus transcends those limitations. We operate beyond conventional constraints, national borders, legal frameworks, oversight mechanisms." "You mean accountability," Michael countered. "Basic distinction between operators and criminals." Something dangerous flashed in Carter's eyes, a glimpse of the cold calculation that had enabled him to betray his own team in Afghanistan. A distinction without difference when the objective justifies the means. And what objective justified killing our team? Michael asked the question that had haunted him for 5 years, finally voiced. Carter's expression hardened. They asked too many questions about supply routes that didn't exist on any manifest. Started connecting dots they shouldn't have noticed. Became a liability rather than an asset. The casual dismissal of lives Michael had fought alongside ignited something long suppressed, a controlled fury that sharpened focus rather than clouding it. And Emma Hayes, the CIA field operative, was she a liability too? Collateral damage? Carter replied without emotion. Unfortunate, but unavoidable in our line of work. You should understand that better than most. Their conversation had created critical seconds for tactical positioning. Michael had established proper angle and distance for the engagement he knew was inevitable. The rain continued to drive between them, reducing visibility and masking subtle movements. One last question, Michael said, body tensing imperceptibly for action. James Mitchell, Army Rangers communications specialist attached to our unit. Was he targeted specifically or just caught in the general sanitization? Carter's eyes narrowed slightly at the unexpected inquiry. Mitchell's intercepts picked up encrypted traffic he shouldn't have been able to access. Made the mistake of saving copies to an external drive. Standard cleanup protocol, nothing personal. The confirmation solidified Michael's resolve. Nathan's father hadn't died in random insurgent violence, but had been deliberately targeted by the man standing before him, the same man now hunting Nathan and Sarah. "It's about to get personal," Michael replied quietly.